I'm going to show you how I use double pointed needles to make the little sweater for the pig from the Three Little Pigs pattern. And if you don't already have the pattern, you will find a link for it in the description box below. But let's go ahead and get out our double pointed needles. These are 3mm needles, and this is my sport weight yarn. We're going to start off with one of the double pointed needles, and we are going to start with the long tail cast on. And the way that I determine where I need to start for my long tail cast on is I take my yarn with a little bit of the tail and I wrap it as many times as I need to cast on, which I need to cast on 40. So here's where I'm going to make my slip knot, and I'm usually pretty generous because I do not want to run out of yarn when I am doing my long tail cast on. So we just cast on like you normally do for a long tail cast on, and the pattern says to cast on 40, which is really the stitches that we're going to be working with, but the way that I do it, I always add 1. So I'm actually going to cast on 41 stitches. And you'll see why when we get to the part where we join these together. And then I always check to make sure that I have the proper number of stitches, because it's no fun to get started and then realize that you didn't cast on enough or you cast on too many stitches. Now the pattern says to distribute all of these stitches across 4 needles evenly. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 10 stitches on 3 additional needles, and we're going to leave 11 on this needle. So I just slip them as if to purl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Let me grab my next needle. And this is the part where we want to make sure that our stitches don't get twisted. So try to keep them from moving all around, which can be a little bit tricky. And then 10 more. So now we have our 10 stitches on 3 needles, and we have 11 on the other. And what we need to do now, if I can hold these properly, make sure that none of our stitches are twisted. We're going to hold this all together and we're just going to flip it upside down. So now our working yarn is on this left-handed needle here, and we're going to be using this right-handed needle. We're basically going to cast off this stitch right here, which is the one where we had 11 stitches. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we're basically going to be casting off this 11th stitch, and we're going to just slip it as if to purl onto our right-handed needle. Then we're going to actually take our last stitch that we cast on, and we're going to slip it over. Now this is the part that can get a little bit tricky because sometimes these stitches are really tight. So make sure to pull on your tail, and we're going to slip that stitch off. Now we are joined in the round. Pull that tail again, and it's a whole lot easier to work this way, and you won't have gaps if you start this way with 1 additional stitch. So I'm an English knitter, and that means I'm going to be holding the yarn in my right hand. And our very first few stitches, I'm going to really tighten this up to make sure that we don't have any gaps. And the pattern says for the first 10 rounds, you're just going to knit 2 and purl 2. And I don't need to put a stitch marker here because I know that this is the beginning of my round, but if you need to put a little stitch marker there, go right ahead. So I'm going to knit, and I'm really going to tighten up the second stitch, because that's where you can get some ladders, which are those long pieces of yarn between your 2 needles, and you just need to pull kind of tightly, especially that second stitch. And then we purl 2. Now I'm coming to this next needle, And so I'm going to be very conscious of my tension here so that I don't create those ladders. And we're on purl right now, 2 pearls. This is where I'm really going to tighten it up. There we go. And this feels a little fumbly in the beginning. I know it feels so awkward, but as you get more rounds on your needles, it ends up being just fine and the needles stabilize because they have more stitches holding them together. So just know that the beginning part always feels awkward. It's awkward for everyone. And I try to be very conscious in the first 3 stitches or so about my tension and getting them nice and tight right there. So now I have finished the last stitch in the round and I'm just going to keep knitting and purling for the next 9 rounds. You'll also find the tutorial for how I separate the sleeves and how we pick them back up later. So check out the description box below for the playlist for all of the video tutorials for the 3 Little Pigs pattern.